I'm Alara, 22, and I always thought my family's legacy was built on marble and steel. I was preparing for my final year of university when I overheard them in my father's study, celebrating my brother. Ambition. They had no idea I was standing in the shadows, or that I was about to begin a restoration project of my own. Not on a painting, but on my life. Before I reveal how I uncovered their masterpiece of deceit, let me know in the comments where you're watching from in the world. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories about family betrayal and the fight for your own worth. Slight shift in music, becoming more narrative. Growing up in the manicured suburbs of Boston, I lived in what I can only describe as a gilded cage. My family didn't just value success. They worshipped at the altar of tangible, high-value assets. My father, Richard, was a prominent real estate developer, a man who saw the world as a series of lots to be acquired and buildings to be erected. My mother, Eleanor, was a professional socialite, her life a carefully curated gallery of charity galas and high society events. And then there was my older brother, Julian. 5 years my senior, he was the crown prince, charismatic and charming, destined to take over the family empire, or so they thought. While they spoke in the language of stock prices and zoning laws, I found my voice in silence and history. My passion was art restoration and conservation, a field my family dismissed with a polite, yet condescending smile. "It's a lovely hobby, dear," my mother would say, as if I were collecting porcelain dolls instead of pursuing a serious academic discipline. My one true ally in the family had been my maternal grandmother. She wasn't born into wealth but had a deep, innate appreciation for art and history. She would take me to the Museum of Fine Arts, her eyes lighting up as she told me the stories behind the brushstrokes. Before she passed away, she established a trust fund for me with a value of approximately $200,000. Her will was explicit. The funds were to be used for my education and cultural enrichment. "This ensures your passion will be protected," my father had said at the reading of the will, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Your grandmother wanted you to have a world-class education, and we will honor that." They repeated this promise so often it became a foundational truth in my life. I worked tirelessly to be worthy of it, maintaining a perfect GPA at the New England Conservatory of Art, earning praise from my professors, and dedicating my summers to unpaid internships at local galleries. Julian, meanwhile, followed a different path. He'd dropped out of an Ivy League business school, claiming the curriculum was antiquated and couldn't keep pace with his visionary ideas. My parents, who would have disowned me for a single B on my report card, lauded his decision. "Julian is a trailblazer," my father would announce at dinner parties. "He doesn't follow paths, he creates them." His creations were a series of failed startups, each more grandiose and ill-conceived than the last. There was a concierge service for bespoke dog walking, a subscription box for artisanal water, and a social network for people who only wore beige. Each failure was cushioned by my parents' endless financial support. Seed money, my father called it. I called it setting fire to a pile of cash. Still, I focused on my own journey. I was accepted into a prestigious restoration program at my university, which would culminate in a senior thesis project. The total cost of my 4-year degree was estimated at around $180,000. My grandmother's trust would cover it all, with enough left for a master's program in Florence, my ultimate dream. At my high school graduation, my parents had beamed. "You make this family look cultured, Alara," my father had said, which was his version of "I'm proud of you." Even with the trust, they insisted I apply for every scholarship available. "It demonstrates a strong work ethic," my mother advised, "and looks wonderful on a resume." I followed their advice, securing about $10,000 in small grants for my freshman year. I was grateful, trusting, and completely oblivious. My first year at the conservatory was a dream. I was surrounded by people who understood the language of pigments and canvas, mentored by professors who saw my passion not as a hobby but as a calling. I'd call home, bubbling with excitement about learning to analyze 17th century Dutch varnish or the intricacies of canvas relining. "That's nice, dear," they'd say, before changing the subject to Julian's latest disruptive idea. When I came home for winter break, I noticed Julian was driving a new Maserati. When I asked, my mother waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, he has a new backer who really believes in his vision." I saw other signs I chose to ignore. My mother's new Cartier watch. My father's talk of opening a satellite office in Dubai. Their casual mentions of Julian meeting with angel investors in Silicon Valley. I was so immersed in my world of art and history that I failed to see the modern art of the con being perfected in my own home. I thought my future was secure, locked away in a trust as solid as the marble in our foyer. I had no idea the foundation was already hollowed out, and I was about to fall through. The first tremor that shook my world came early in my sophomore year. The tuition payment was approaching, and I called my father to discuss the logistics. I was thinking, I said, it might be more efficient to arrange a direct transfer from the trust to the university each semester. It would save you the trouble. A strange tight silence hung on the line before he answered. Let's not get bogged down in the mechanics, Alara. We have it under control. His tone was clipped, almost irritated. I chalked it up to a stressful day at his firm, but a seed of unease was planted. A few weeks later, my mother called, her voice laced with carefully crafted concern. They were reallocating some assets, she explained, due to a volatile market. Nothing for you to be concerned about. She chirped when I asked for details. Just boring financial strategy. Meanwhile, Julian's life, as curated on his Instagram, was anything but boring. He was attending tech summits in Zurich, yachting in Monaco, and posting photos from a lavish new office space in Boston's Seaport District. For Thanksgiving, he showed up in a brand new custom suit that probably cost more than my semester's worth of art supplies. The new app is about to launch, he announced grandly. Mom and Dad have been incredible. They see the long-term vision. During that visit, I saw my parents snap their laptops shut whenever I entered the study. I heard my father on the phone, his voice low. We'll tell her after the new year, no point in ruining her holidays. My anxiety began to coil in my stomach. I decided to force the issue. My dream program, a semester abroad studying under a master restorer in Amsterdam, required a non-refundable $10,000 deposit. I need to secure my spot for the Amsterdam program by next week, I announced at dinner. Can we talk about accessing the trust for the deposit? My father coughed, a sudden sharp sound. My mother's smile froze on her face. Darling, she began, her voice dripping with false sympathy, perhaps we should reconsider. International study is a wonderful experience, but it's a luxury. With the current economic climate, Dory? I repeated, bewildered. You both said international experience was vital. The trust has more than enough. The situation is more complex than you understand, Alara, my father said, his voice firm, final. We will discuss this another time. But another time never arrived. They became masters of evasion. Around then, I was having coffee with my roommate, Chloe. The topic turned to family finances. My parents gave me full read-only access to my college fund account. Our friend Ben mentioned. They want me to learn about investing by watching it grow. The words struck me like a physical blow. My father was a real estate mogul, yet I had never seen a single statement from my own trust fund. I had only ever had their word. That evening, I logged into our family's shared cloud server, looking for a document I needed for a scholarship renewal. What I found was a folder labeled Family Assets. My heart pounding, I clicked it. Inside were dozens of recent financial statements. I saw massive wire transfers from an account I didn't recognize to a corporation named Elysian Enterprises, LLC, my brother's new company. The balances on the trust statements were shockingly low. Before I could download anything, an error message popped up. My access had been revoked. A minute later, a text from my father, just doing some digital housekeeping on the server. Let me know if you need anything. My suspicion turned into cold dread. They claimed financial strain but had just posted photos of a kitchen renovation that cost 6 figures. They urged me to find a campus job yet had just funded Julian's networking trip to Art Basel in Miami, not for the art, but for the parties. The university's tuition deadline was now just 3 weeks away. My calls to my parents were met with vague reassurances. We're on top of it, Alara, my mother would insist. Stop worrying. I couldn't. The university had already sent a second payment reminder. I decided to drive home the following weekend, unannounced. I needed a face-to-face conversation, a direct answer. I had no idea that I wouldn't need to ask a single question to learn the devastating truth. It was a cold, gray Saturday when I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. My parents' cars were there, alongside Julian's gleaming Maserati. A family meeting, apparently. One I wasn't invited to. Instead of walking in, I lingered, a strange premonition holding me back. The large window of my father's ground-floor study was slightly ajar to air out the cigar smoke. Muffled but excited voices drifted out. I crept closer, hiding behind the manicured hedges my mother was so proud of. The $200,000 from your grandmother's trust for Alara gives you the runway you need, my father's voice boomed. It's the perfect capital injection to get Elysian through the launch and the first 2 quarters. I froze, my fingers digging into the rough bark of a nearby oak tree. $200,000. The entire trust. Gone. Are you sure she won't find out before we can spin it? Julian asked. There was a note of concern in his voice, but it was the concern of a co-conspirator, not a brother. We'll handle it, my mother replied, her voice smooth as silk. We'll sit her down, show her some manufactured statements about a major downturn in the art market. We'll tell her the trust took a catastrophic, unrecoverable hit. She'd be disappointed, of course, but Alara is resourceful. She can take out loans. So many students do. Exactly, my father added. And frankly, this investment in Julian's company is a far better use of the capital. It benefits the entire family's portfolio. Once Elysian is acquired, he can pay off her student loans in a heartbeat if it makes everyone feel better. When does the tuition bill come due? Julian asked. In 3 weeks, Dad replied. We've been dodging her calls. I've already had my assistant mock up some documents showing how the antiquities and fine art investment sector collapsed. It looks completely legitimate. She's a smart girl, my mother cautioned. We need to be convincing. I've been practicing my sorrowful expression in the mirror. I heard Julian laugh. A light, carefree sound that ripped through me. The world tilted, the colors of the autumn leaves seeming to bleed together. They hadn't lost the money. They had stolen it. They had taken my grandmother's legacy, my educational future, my dream of Florence, and handed it to my brother for his vaporware app. And they were preparing to lie to my face to perform a play of sympathy while they were the architects of my ruin. This is going to be massive, Julian said, his voice giddy. With this funding, we're untouchable. We always knew you were destined for great things, my mother said, her voice thick with adoration. And the best part, my father concluded, is we keep it all in the family. No outside investors taking a slice of the pie. Everything except my future, it seemed. I must have stumbled, a twig snapping under my shoe. The voices inside stopped. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, my movements silent and desperate. I got back into my car, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in the ignition. I drove to a deserted scenic overlook, the Boston skyline blurry through my tears. The betrayal was absolute. It was a premeditated, calculated act of destruction. My phone buzzed. A call from my mother, then my father. They must have seen my car. I ignored them, the sound of their names on my screen feeling like an accusation. Instead, I called the one person I knew would understand. Chloe! I sobbed when she answered. They took it. They took everything. Alara, slow down, she said, her voice instantly sharp with concern. Who took what? I gasped out the story, the words tumbling over each other in a torrent of pain and rage. When I finished, Chloe's response was immediate and firm. That's not just a betrayal, Alara, that's theft. Depending on the legal structure of that trust, they may have committed fraud. Her words cut through my emotional fog. I hadn't thought about the legality. I only felt the wound. You need to find out exactly how that trust was structured, Chloe insisted. You can't go into a war without intelligence. You taught me that when we were studying Napoleon. She was right. An emotional explosion would get me nowhere. I needed facts. I needed leverage. My aunt is an estate lawyer, Chloe continued. Her name is Genevieve Dubois. She specializes in trusts and fiduciary responsibilities. Let me send you her number. Call her. Now. As I hung up, a cold calm began to settle over my heart. The shock was hardening into resolve. My family had underestimated me. They saw me as the quiet, pliable, artistic daughter. They were about to meet the conservator, the one who would meticulously strip away their layers of varnish and lies to reveal the ugly truth underneath. My plan began to form, not with rage, but with the cold, precise clarity of a restoration blueprint. This betrayal would not be the end of my story. It would be the beginning. The next morning, I was sitting in the polished mahogany office of Genevieve Dubois. She was an elegant, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who listened to my entire story without interruption, her pen poised over a legal pad. First things first, she said when I finished, her voice calm and authoritative. We need the trust document. Your grandmother's will. Anything and everything you can find. You said your grandmother was your ally? She was my everything, I whispered. Then she likely put protections in place, Genevieve surmised. People like your grandmother who build their own fortunes are often meticulous about protecting their legacy from people like your parents. The problem was I had no documents. My parents controlled everything. There are other ways, Genevieve assured me. As a named beneficiary who is of legal age, you have the right to request all documentation directly from the financial institution that managed the trust. Your parents will not be notified of this request. For the next week, I lived a double life. By day, I was the diligent art student. By night, with Genevieve's guidance, I became a financial detective. We discovered the trust was held at a small private Boston bank. As Genevieve had predicted, my grandmother had been shrewd. The trust was an irrevocable trust, and I was the sole beneficiary. My father was named as the trustee, which gave him management authority, but with a strict fiduciary duty to act only in my best interest for the purposes of education and cultural enrichment. Liquidating the entire trust to fund your brother's speculative tech venture is a flagrant violation of that duty, Genevieve said, a grim satisfaction in her voice. This is a massive breach. But there was more. My grandmother, it turned out, had left me something else, something my parents had either overlooked or deemed worthless. Tucked away in a safety deposit box, under my name alone, was a collection of signed first edition art history textbooks and a portfolio of several original sketches by a moderately famous 19th century artist she had admired. Your parents see value in dollars and square feet, Genevieve noted. They would never have understood the cultural and monetary value of these. While Genevieve prepared the legal strategy, I went to work. I contacted Dr. Alastair Finch, my favorite professor and a renowned expert in 19th century art. He was appalled by my story and immediately agreed to help authenticate and value the sketches. Your grandmother had an incredible eye, Alara, he said, examining the drawings with a loupe. These are worth a considerable sum. At least $50,000, maybe more at the right auction. The books, sold through a specialized dealer, fetched another $15,000. It wasn't the $200,000 they had taken, but it was a start. It was my money, clean and untouchable. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and deposited the funds. I found a tiny but affordable studio apartment near campus. I applied for every grant and scholarship, my personal statement now burning with a newfound purpose. Dr. Finch also offered me a paid position as his lead research assistant for a book he was writing. It's a disgrace what they did, he fumed. The academic community must support its own. The work was demanding, but it was a lifeline. I was balancing a full course load, a 20-hour-a-week job, and a secret legal battle, while Julian was posting photos of his team playing ping pong in their lavish office. I was in the library until 2 a.m., surviving on coffee and the cold fire of my resolve. I ignored my parents' increasingly frantic calls and saccharine text messages. We need to talk about your tuition, darling. We have some difficult news, but we'll get through it together. They were still planning to perform their play, unaware that I was already building a new set. They think they hold all the cards, I told Genevieve during one of our meetings. They don't realize I'm playing an entirely different game, she replied with a thin smile. Now for the confrontation. We need to choose the right time and place. A moment of maximum leverage. That moment came sooner than I expected. The Boston Museum of Art, where I had interned, was hosting its annual gala. The centerpiece of the evening was the unveiling of a recently restored painting, a forgotten masterpiece from a local artist. The lead restoration apprentice, who had spent the last 6 months painstakingly bringing it back to life, was going to be publicly honored. That apprentice was me. I knew my parents would be there. It was the premier social event of the season. Eleanor wouldn't miss it for the world. They would walk in expecting to see their friends and business associates. They had no idea they were walking into my theater. The time for defense was over. It was time for the reveal. The night of the gala, the museum buzzed with the clinking of champagne glasses and the low hum of Boston's elite. I saw my parents across the grand hall, my mother in a glittering gown, my father shaking hands with the mayor. They looked radiant, powerful, completely at ease. They hadn't seen me yet. I was backstage, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I was wearing a simple, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to my usual paint-splattered work clothes. Chloe was with me, squeezing my hand. You look like you're about to unveil a masterpiece and dismantle an empire, she whispered. I'm so proud of you. The museum director, a formidable woman named Miss Albright, stepped up to the podium. After a few opening remarks, she began to speak about the evening's main event. Tonight we celebrate the revival of a piece of Boston's history, she announced. A painting that has been in our archives for 70 years, gifted by a patron with a profound love for the city's art. It was in terrible condition, but thanks to the tireless, brilliant work of a rising star from the New England Conservatory, it has been brought back to its former glory. I saw my parents preening, enjoying the speech. This was their world. This restoration was a masterclass in skill and dedication. Miss Albright continued, led by a young woman with a talent far beyond her years. It is my great honor to introduce the lead restoration apprentice, Miss Elara Vance. I stepped onto the stage as the spotlight found me. I could see the exact moment my parents registered my name. My father's smile froze. My mother's hand flew to her pearls, her eyes wide with disbelief. A ripple of confusion passed over their faces. Julian, standing beside them, just looked baffled. The curtain behind me rose, revealing the restored painting on a large easel. It was a beautiful, melancholic seascape. And there is a poignant story here, Miss Albright added, her voice filling the now silent hall. The patron who originally donated this painting to the museum was none other than Elara's own grandmother, the late Evelyn Reed. That was the final blow. The collective gasp from my family was audible even over the polite applause. The painting wasn't just my triumph. It was a symbol of the legacy they had betrayed. After the ceremony, as I was being congratulated by trustees and patrons, my family cornered me in a quieter side gallery. Their faces were masks of fury and confusion. What is the meaning of this? My father hissed, his public smile gone. When did all this happen? For the last 6 months, I said calmly, my voice steady, while you were reallocating my assets. You have been deceiving us, my mother accused, her voice trembling, letting us believe this is a public humiliation. No, I corrected her, my voice dropping to a near whisper. This is a public triumph. The humiliation is a private matter between you and your consciences. You were the ones planning a deception. A performance, I believe you called it, complete with a sorrowful expression you'd been practicing. The color drained from my mother's face. Julian stepped forward. Elara, I don't know what you think you heard. I didn't think I heard anything, Julian. I cut him off. I heard everything. The $200,000. The plan to lie. The belief that my life's passion was a lesser investment than your app. I turned to my father. You breached your fiduciary duty as trustee, a term I'm sure you're familiar with. I have the documentation and I have legal counsel. My father's face, for the first time in my life, showed a flicker of genuine fear. This is a family matter, he sputtered. You can't. It stopped being a family matter when you made a business decision with my life, I said. But don't worry. I'm not going to sue. I'm not going to create a public scandal. I'm simply going to continue on my own path. Julian's face was pale. Be you to the funding. Elysian needs the rest of that capital. The next round of payroll is due. I looked at my brother at the entitlement and panic warring in his eyes, and I felt a sliver of pity. That sounds like a business problem, Julian. You'll have to find a way to pivot. I turned to my parents. I have secured my own funding for the rest of my education. I have found my own place to live. My tuition is paid. The assets my grandmother left me, the ones you didn't understand, have taken care of me. Her legacy is safe. Your control over my life is over. I turned and walked away, leaving them. Standing there in the silent gallery, their carefully constructed world collapsing around them, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The masterpiece was complete. In the weeks that followed the gala, the fallout was swift and silent. There were no more angry calls, only a thick, impenetrable wall of silence. I moved into my small studio apartment, and the independence felt more luxurious than any marble foyer. My grandmother's sketches, sold at a private auction, funded my final year and provided the seed money for my dream. Dr. Finch, impressed by my work, nominated me for a prestigious fellowship for postgraduate study. I poured my story into the application essay, the betrayal, the restoration, the fight for my inheritance. I wrote about how preserving the past had taught me how to build a future. Julian's app, Elysian, without its final round of family funding, imploded spectacularly within 3 months. The story, pieced together from gossip in the Boston business world, was that he'd burned through nearly $500,000 with little more than a fancy office and a broken prototype to show for it. He called me about 6 months later. His voice was different, humbled, quiet. I got a job, he said. A real one. Entry-level analyst. I had to sell the Maserati. He paused. I was wrong, Elara, about everything. I was weak, and I let them convince me that I was entitled to your future. I've started paying back what I can. It's not much, just a few $100s a month, but it's a start. I accepted his apology and his money, recognizing it not as a settlement, but as the first brick in a long, slow road to rebuilding something between us. My parents and I remained estranged. They couldn't comprehend a world where they weren't in control, where their actions had permanent consequences. Through Julian, I heard they told their friends that I was going through a rebellious phase. 2 weeks before my graduation, I received a letter. I had been awarded the Giovanni de' Medici Fellowship for Restoration Studies. It came with a full scholarship and a living stipend for 2 years of master's study in Florence. My dream, deferred and nearly destroyed, was now a reality earned on my own terms. My graduation day was a small, perfect affair. Chloe was there, along with Dr. Finch and even Genevieve Dubois, who brought me a beautifully bound copy of a book on fiduciary law. For your future reference, she said with a wink. Julian came too. He handed me a small gift. It was a simple, elegant frame. For your master's degree when you get it, he said, to hang on your wall. It was a gesture that said more than words ever could. The final chapter of this story came a year later. Using the skills I'd honed and the network I'd built, I established a small foundation in my grandmother's name, the Evelyn Reed Grant. Funded by my own work as a consultant for private art collectors, it provides micro-grants to underprivileged art students who need money for supplies, research trips, or tuition. My pain had been transformed into a purpose. I'm speaking to you now from my small apartment overlooking the Arno River in Florence. The light here is just as magical as they say. Every day I work with my hands, painstakingly bringing beauty back to life, honoring the past while building my future. My family's betrayal was the ugliest canvas I'd ever been handed, but it forced me to learn how to mix my own colors. I learned that true value isn't in what you can buy, but in what you can build, protect, and restore. The strongest legacies aren't carved in stone. They are painted with resilience, layer by painful layer. Have you ever had a moment of betrayal that forced you to discover your own strength? Do you believe it's possible to build a better future, not in spite of the past, but because of it? Share your story in the comments below. I read everyone. And if my journey resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more. Thank you for being a part of my restoration.